We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Line Movement. I hope we're back at least. Part 2, I guess, link number 2. Every time that happens, I'm not sure exactly how to fix it outside of completely changing the event. So it looks like almost everyone found us here, guys. Let me know, how's the volume? Am I still a robot? Please let me know. Please, God, let me not be a robot anymore. Let me know in the chat, for the love of God. We're good. All right, boys. Sorry about that. Yeah, honestly, that's gonna have to be some sort of long process with YouTube to make sure. That's been happening like once every like 2 or 3 weeks, and normally it happens in the middle of the stream. At least this time it happened at the very beginning. So let's get to the task at hand here, guys. Late swap. How was everyone's first half of the slate? Because that's how we have to look at this, right? So we have to look at this as what was the failures that we have in our lineups already. Are we wide open? Do we have no idea what's going on? There's a lot of things that we have to get to. And I said it before, and I know I was in a robot voice, so I'll say it again. Guys, this is my favorite stream to do of the entire year. And I'm not kidding, because I think that we were kind of robbed of this last week. We had the 2 short slates. But this is where we really get in the weeds and we got to be honest with ourselves, right? So like what I basically do is I go through and build out my first couple mini stacks on these teams. I'm a little bit different. I don't build out like a full lineup, because sometimes you can get anchored to where I guess you just aren't willing to change your teams. I don't even care about that. I'm building these teams as the slate is going on. Now you have to be a little bit thoughtful about the salary you're leaving open, of course. But I think that the first step of this, guys, is to be honest with ourselves here. So I have a poll for us here. And this first poll is just, I want to get a pulse of where you guys feel like you're at right now. Because I think this is one of the ones that, one of the slates where it's not always comfortable, right? So where are we? How would you rate your start on this slate? Let's make this a little bit bigger so our people on mobile can see it. How would you rate your start? If you are a sub of this channel, this is a sub-only vote. If you're not a sub, consider subscribing to the channel, all that good stuff. But exclamation point vote space the number. Terrible. Yesterday was terrible. You're dead already. Maybe you're unsure with lots of PMR left. Maybe you have a couple failures and you have some decent PMR. Not a ton of PMR, but you've got some failures in there. You're not sure what to do. Great spot. No swaps for you. You're golden. Or you have no idea. Because I think some people are probably in that category, right? You have no idea what to do today. So where are we at right now as a group? How was our start? This is the most important, I think, conversation we're going to have today. You have to be honest with yourselves on where you're at right now. There's some teams I have, and thankfully I was mostly light. Like I said, I was taking some mini stacks as I went. I haven't really played a quarterback on any of my main teams yet, so in that regard, I'm sitting okay. One thing that we're going to do on this stream in a little bit is we're going to go through some of my teams, and I'll actually give you guys an idea of how I'm going about doing some of these swaps with some real examples. We'll go through that. We'll go through some of the top scorers, the highest owned guys. There's a lot to do today, guys. This is one we first have to start out. Where are we at? Let's be honest with ourselves here. How did the slate start for us yesterday? We're halfway home, but there's still a long way to go. If your teams are looking good, great. I think you need some PMR though. That's my stance on it so far, right? So I think we got a lot of chalk coming our way still, guys. So 111 votes so far, almost 100 likes so far. Let's get that up, guys. I messed up that link before, whatever happened with that YouTube error. So let's try and get the likes back over 100. Hopefully more people will kind of file in here as the morning goes on. So it looks like most of you guys are somewhere in the middle with a couple failures. And the reason I did this poll is that if you're somewhere in the middle, you're in more trouble than you think. I'm serious. And I'm not going to be like, there's times where we'll joke around. I'll be your friend. I'm not your friend today. I'm here to tell you that if you're in somewhere in the middle, you're behind. You're behind. So we'll get to some ways to help you guys kind of remedy that in some ways. But let's do this first. I want to go over and talk about some of the top scorers of the slate. So this is just on DK Live. I think it's just an easy way to kind of see what's been happening so far. So the top scorers so far: Stephon Diggs, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Adam Lazard, And I wish we could look at ownership here, but if you saw my tweet earlier today, maybe I'll just bring that up so you guys can see it. If you saw my tweet, let's scroll down here. Here's some ownerships of these as well. So make sure you guys follow me on Twitter if you haven't already, especially slates like this. I'm always trying to give you guys some value in that way. So some of the top scorers and their ownership levels. Diggs, Rodgers, Adams, Lazard. So Diggs, 27 to 30% owned. He was not super chalky in comparison to like some of the stuff that we have coming. Cam Akers, 45 to 50% owned, was the highest owned guy on the slate. So it was the highest owned players yesterday. Akers, Singletary, Jones, Diggs, LA Rams, Andrews, Baltimore, Reynolds, Buffalo, Allen. So if we're just looking at this, guys, the reason I said that if you're in somewhere in the middle of that poll right now, you're behind. Because if you're, let's go back to it. If you're somewhere over here where you have a couple decent failures or a couple failures and decent PMR, couple failures, guys, it's not great on this slate right now. I know it's a 4-game slate, but there's a lot of really good plays coming. So if you're in a spot right now where you're thinking that you have a bunch of these guys at the top, great. But if you're somewhere down here and you have like some Robert Woods teams, you have some Smokey Brown teams. I think this bottom one is Marquise Brown, I believe. I don't know why I tweeted it like that. Yeah, Marquise Brown, 12.7, John Brown, 14. So if you have some failures in here, and in terms of failures, we're looking at some of the higher owned plays. If you have Singletary teams, you are very behind. Very behind. Because we'll get to this. Obviously, Clyde Edwards-Helaire looks like he's trending towards not playing, or if he is playing, being extremely limited. So we're going to have both those running backs coming in and possibly passing the Singletary teams. So we'll talk about Williams. We'll talk about Le'Veon Bell in a second, and we'll get into that. But we need to get our footing here on where we're at. So what scares me a little bit on these teams that are in between, if you have some sort of failure, and by failure, I mean someone in the chat's asking what I mean by failure, by someone that like largely underperformed what their projection was, and they were one of the more popular plays. So if you're looking at just the quarterbacks so far, a rough percentage of the quarterbacks used, only 33% of your contests right now have quarterbacks that have already been played. So Rodgers, he was like 49%. This is all depending on your contest, right? Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Goff was like unowned, of course. Goff wasn't even in my player pool yesterday. It's one of the first things we said. Josh Allen, 13 to 15%. Lamar Jackson, roughly 13%. So that leaves us with 66%. This is how I think it's going to shake out. I think it's going to be about 35% Mahomes. I think Brady and Mayfield will be very close, around 12% or so. And I think Breeze will be the lowest. But I think that honestly, these three guys at the bottom, it's close enough to where it doesn't really matter. So you kind of just pick where your lineups are at with your stacks, that sort of thing. Mahomes. So in order to stay on Mahomes, there's a couple things here. And some of you are probably sitting there like, oh, I have Mahomes. I have a Mahomes stack. I'm sitting pretty. That might be true. The one thing about Mahomes teams is you're probably a little bit more wide open just because of the pricing. If you have a Mahomes, Kelsey, Tyreek team, you're probably feeling pretty good right now. And we'll go through some specific examples here. But in terms of incoming chalk, we've got Tyreek Hill. He's probably going to come in around 50%. This is all research that I did this morning, by the way, and I kind of went through some of my teams to get a feel for how it was, some different contests and different ownership projections, that sort of thing. So I think Hill and Kelsey, they're probably going to be 45%, roughly. In some of the smaller field stuff that we're playing, they might even be higher. Mahomes, 35, like I said. Kamara, Thomas, in like that 30% range. Honestly, guys, that's not terrible for a 4-game slate. Kamara and Thomas, I still think there's a decent amount of leverage with those guys. And then we get into the guys with Cleveland, Landry, Hooper, whoever, I guess, pick your poison with Godwin, Evans, Antonio Brown, Kareem Hunt in there. And then we have the, obviously this was earlier in the day, so like some of the top leverage spots will get there. I think that having a piece of the Kansas City running game, regardless of what you think the split is going to be between Daryl Williams and Le'Veon Bell, the leverage that you're getting on the 25 to 40% of the field that played Singletary. And this is the thing, guys. This is where it depends on your stakes. It depends on your field size a lot, because the Singletary one, there's a couple plays here where it was a very large range, right? At the lower stakes, It was about like who is much more heavily owned at the lower stakes. At the higher stakes, a lot of people faded Singletary because he was pretty obviously bad chalk. We talked about it yesterday. I ended up with 0 Singletary, so I'm pretty good spot there. But Reynolds, same kind of thing, but the opposite. At the lower stakes, he was very low. At the higher stakes, he was pretty high. So you have to take that into consideration as well when you're looking at some failures that you had. So there's a lot that we have to kind of sift through here, guys. But I think if you're asking yourself about if you're okay to stay where you're at, if you ended up on some Singletary teams, if you ended up on a bunch of LA Rams teams, some Baltimore defense teams, some Mark Andrews teams, any of these quarterbacks, 25 for Rodgers, okay, that's fine. You might be able to stay on a Rodgers team if it's like a skinny, something like that. If you have a Lazard Rodgers team, maybe you're in a good spot. You probably don't have to do much to your Rodgers teams, but if you played one of Goff, Allen, or Jackson, you are buried currently. Completely buried. Like you're blowing up every single one of those teams. Completely buried. And again, this is like, it's not a fun conversation to have sometimes, guys, but this is one of those ones where I'm gonna be your friend and tell you that if you're in this spot right here where you have a couple failures and some decent PMR, you're behind, especially if you played one of those quarterbacks. So there's ways that we can remedy this, guys. That's the good news. I think one of the things that I'm really focused on these slates is trying to get different with roster construction and be thoughtful about the type of leverage plays that I'm going to let enter my teams at this point. So a couple ways to do that in terms of roster construction is to completely overstack it. So if you have a lot of PMR left and you feel like you didn't have enough of those failures to where you can still roll with Mahomes, I think it's totally fine. Totally fine. Mahomes, like that game is extremely, I think, hard to get away from if you have a lot of PMR because it could end up lapping the field in a lot of ways. If you're somewhere in between, my personal recommendation is that you should try and figure out a way to get creative with Brees or Brady in game number 4. Maybe you grab a piece of this game and you hope that the price tags are high enough on Tyreek Hill, on Travis Kelce, on Patrick Mahomes, that not having them isn't something that you needed to get to the top. And we're trying to get to the top, guys. So most of you guys are tournament players at this point if you're in this stream right now. And I put myself in that same category also. So just min cashing is not something I'm super interested in. That's a great way to not be profitable long-term is if you're only min cashing and you're not taking chances. So I'm still trying to win at this point, guys. I'm still trying to get to the point where there's some teams that I have. And again, wait until the end. We'll go through some specific examples of some of my teams. We'll talk about some of your guys as well. It's hard for me to tell you exactly what to do. We had a discussion about this in the Discord today because I don't know what contest you're in. I don't know the exact kind of, what type of chances, like where is your risk tolerance, number one? Are you okay with returning 0? And I don't know exactly the context of what your rosters are exactly built for. So it's harder to do that. So I'm going to show you some examples of some things that I'm doing. So we'll get to that. I'll just say this, guys, like if you're sitting there and you're opening your DraftKings and you're just like, hey, I'm looking pretty good. I'm winning a bunch of money. This is great. I've got 4 slots open on my roster and I've got Singletary on my team and I've got Rams defense on my team. It's not good enough. So, anyways, not to be extremely negative, let's get over to something a little bit more fun. I guess fun and painful at the same time. Let's do another poll. So what was our biggest regret yesterday? Biggest regret. Is it Singletary? Is it Rams D? Some of these plays we're talking about that were pretty popular that ended up kind of burying us a little bit in terms of what to do now. Maybe your biggest regret was not enough Diggs. Did you lock Diggs at captain in the showdown slate like I did? Let's see where you guys are at. Exclamation point vote, space the number. This is a sub-only vote. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Toss a like on this video. Let's get more people in here. More people need to know that they're behind. So in terms of the showdown slate, had some people messaging me on Twitter because they wanted to see the Diggs captains. Yeah, it was a really good slate, not Twitter worthy in terms of the screenshots. I think I went 4X, which is fantastic. Not enough Bills defense teams. I don't play a lot of the defenses usually. So if one thing breaks my way, like maybe Marquise Brown catches that bomb and then the Bills defense teams lose points, could have easily been another 50K score, which was kind of brutal. But we'll take the win, survive in advance. The task at hand here is figuring out what to do with our late swaps on the main slate. A lot of others here. Some Rams D people, Singletary. We tried to warn you about the Singletary thing. There was definitely some concerns there. Akers was pretty clearly the better option. Obviously, it was a little bit more expensive. But the good news is, if you didn't play Singletary, there's ways that you can pass those teams for sure, right? So we'll get to like the Le'Veon Bell, Daryl Williams. I think both of those guys are really strong plays. We'll get to some specific late swap targets that I have so far. Joe's dropping the gloves on our shitty lineups. I mean, I'm not here to give you guys all the rainbows and sunshine right now, guys. This is a game where we're trying to beat others, and I want to help you guys get there. And it doesn't mean that you have to completely blow up everything you've done. If this ends up being a really low-scoring slate, you might be okay to cash, but I'm here to help you guys try and get all the way to the top, right? And if it takes me telling you to get a little bit more aggressive for you guys to make that uncomfortable play today, I think it's worth it. A lot of times now, like, this is the morning where there's going to be certain teams that feel uncomfortable. Most of the time, that's not the direction you want to go. You want to go with the uncomfortable one. Just going to make sure I didn't miss any other news so far this morning. Yeah, as far as I know, Talib, thank you for your super chat. Darwin Thompson is not in. We have Williams and Bell as our guys if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is extremely limited in this spot or just inactive. Appreciate your super chat though, my man. The good news is, like, even if it ends up being like kind of like a relatively even split for these guys, Daryl Williams and Le'Veon Bell, I think that based on their pricing, I think they still both project relatively well. I think Daryl Williams at 4K is a guy that I've played more of so far. So take that for what it's worth. Cole Beasley killed you. Yeah, Beasley was one that I think a lot of people got on because of, like, that's where you attack that team, right? I ended up with more digs just because I kind of believe when the chips are down, they're just going to move him around like crazy and get him into those spots. Bucks or Chiefs D. Swaggy's just going all the... Hang on, let me scroll up. Swaggy has 3 or 4 things in here. This guy versus this guy. We'll get to that, guys, but I mean, that's not really... You're missing the point. The point is you have to figure out where your roster is. I can't just literally just be like, hey, Bucks or Chiefs D. Like, that doesn't help you. What helps you is giving you an idea of what to do with your specific spot. Hunter Chubb. Yeah, it's like the same kind of thing, guys. So, okay. So that's kind of where we're at on our biggest regrets. I figured it would be kind of the Singletary and Rams D sort of thing. So let's talk a little bit about some options here. What are our options? So let's go over to the NFL data table to do this. So linemovement.com, resources tab, NFL data table. One of the things that we have here is a leverage score metric. So we can look at some situations based on ownership, ceiling. There's a couple of things that we got to tweak on here. Obviously, Sammy Watkins out. That'll be out of here. So one of the things that I talked about in my tweet here was a couple of the late swap, like leverage pivots pending your field size. I think that at quarterback, I do really like the idea of Brees because I think that game could skew pretty pass heavy. And especially if you're in some spots where you have some failures and you have Mahomes and Tyreek, it's not hard to get to a Brees, Kamara, Michael Thomas stack. And I think that's going to be more unique with the spot that we're at right now. Obviously, early in the morning, we had CEH in here, so you can kind of put Bell or Darrell Williams in this. I like Nick Chubb a lot for leverage, because I think he's the guy that doesn't really fit with this game, and he's the one, if we're just looking at ownership, that's probably going to get squeezed in that price range. And by that, I mean, like, in that price range, he's 6,600. I don't think a lot of people have that salary available, and if they do, they're probably going to do it with the wide receivers that they have available. So wide receivers, I still think, like I said, Michael Thomas is probably, those having some Saints exposure is a priority for me this morning. So if you are completely dead, and a lot of this stuff, it depends on how dead you are. If you're completely dead, I like the Emmanuel Sanders pivot. I like the Jared Cook pivot. I also think that Godwin is probably still in play for a lot of you guys, because if we're just looking here at where the ownership is going to be coming, Godwin and Evans are going to be relatively close. At the higher stakes, I think Godwin will be higher, Evans will be lower. So I think that if you're completely dead, Evans is probably the play, or Antonio Brown. I think Higgins is kind of in a weird price range to where he's a reasonable bring back with Mahomes teams for sure. Like we've talked about Higgins and Landry as being really strong plays. Higgins is still popping, I think, based on his price as a decent amount of leverage. And then these like really cheap tight ends. But like, again, like you'll notice a theme here, guys. A lot of the leverage is in game number 4, not necessarily in this Chiefs game. So I think there's going to be some people that are trying to figure out what to do with like McCole Hardman versus Robinson, those type of guys. So like it's a little bit easier because if we're just looking at the wide receivers there, Demarcus Robinson is 4,300. A lot of people are just going to take the savings and play McCole Hardman, but Demarcus Robinson's probably going to be half the ownership. So there's ways to get unique with your KC and Cleveland game also. I just think this is where the top leverage is. New Orleans defense, that's a price thing. I don't think a lot of people are going to play because it's a little bit more expensive. Cleveland defense, no one's going to play a defense against Patrick Mahomes. We saw yesterday how it can completely change a slate if something like this Buffalo defense situation happens. You know what I mean? So these are the guys that I'm focused on building around if my teams are completely dead. Like I said, there's a little bit of context that has to be had here. Like, I don't know where you're at with these specific players from yesterday. Maybe you've got a Van Jefferson team that's mostly wide open, but you didn't have Cam Akers. Maybe you have Cam Akers, but you didn't have, but you already played a quarterback, right? So I think if you played one of these quarterbacks outside of Aaron Rodgers, depending on if you had Lazard with your Aaron Rodgers team, you're blowing up all your Allen teams, all your Lamar Jackson teams. I think that kind of goes without saying. Any other like specific questions, guys? I want to go through. I think it's honestly more useful. We can go through the plays all we want. I think it's more useful today to go through some real world situations with some of the lineups that I had, and we can kind of go through a couple of your guys' questions after that. But yeah, I think one of my big, I guess to kind of wrap up, one of my big priorities is if teams are very dead, I'm trying to get more exposure to this New Orleans and Tampa Bay game. I also think that for the people that played that didn't play Singletary, you could pass a lot of those teams, I think, by getting some access to these Kansas City running backs, either Le'Veon or Darwin Thompson. I'm going to have a little bit of both. I prefer Darwin Thompson because of the price, and I think that, not Darwin Thompson, Daryl Williams. It's just a complete mess. I prefer Daryl Williams because of the 4K price tag over Le'Veon Bell, but I still think Le'Veon's okay. I think both of those guys project really similarly, and I'll probably just have more of the cheaper guy. So in terms of... let's see if I missed any of these polls that we had so far today. I guess did a couple of them because I want to get into a couple of the roster stuff. So let's do that. Let's go over the rosters. So here's a couple of my teams, guys. We got some tilt space teams in here as well, which I'm not going to go completely through. So let's just go. I've like I said, I've got basically all wide open quarterback teams. Didn't play any quarterbacks yesterday on any of these teams. So a couple of these ones, I think this is the one that we built on stream with Hodge. It's wide open besides Akers, but I'm probably not going to touch this one. That's more of a stack with that last game. Let's find a team that has some failure in it. Let's talk about this team. So far, we have Aaron Jones, we have Robert Woods, we have John Brown, we have Mark Andrews, and we have Ravens D. This team is like mostly dead, I would say. But let's take these out and look at this a little bit more objectively here. So Aaron Jones, reasonable. I mean, if we're just looking at like some of the top scorers yesterday, Aaron Jones was the 7th highest scorer on the slate at about 25% ownership. Robert Woods, 15. He was 11th highest on the slate, only 6 to 10% ownership, so not a lot there. John Brown was fine. Mark Andrews was Mark Andrews was one of the bigger failures, just looking at ownership. 6th highest owned player yesterday, only 6.8 points. Ravens defense, you're behind if you have Ravens defense. So this is like, this is an example of a team that I probably wouldn't stay with Mahomes on this. I think there's enough failure in here to where you're probably, like we're just looking at Mark Andrews and Ravens D probably. If it was a little bit more wide open, or if it did have like Bills D, I could see maybe staying on Mahomes. So what happens if we go to, let's just say, for example, Brees. And let's put in Daryl. So we still have a lot of salary to work with here, guys. We can probably still play Thomas on this, and we have 8,600 remaining. So if we did want to have a share of Tyreek Hill, we could. If we wanted to fully stack Kamara, we could. And again, guys, this remaining salary, totally irrelevant at this point. Doesn't matter. You're trying to build a little bit more of a unique team. So this might be a spot where you're just trying to, this team's not completely dead, obviously. There's some decent plays in here. Aaron Jones, Robert Woods at that price point. It looks okay. This team is in trouble for, obviously, it's not going to be the complete nuts. So you go something like this, or if you think you need more leverage, maybe you go with something like this. Emmanuel Sanders. And then you still need ceiling. That's one thing that I want to kind of hammer home here. You could go with like Tyreek on this as a one-off, something like that. You could go like a Jared Cook. And then maybe you don't want to play Darrell on this team. Maybe you play like a Chubb. That leaves us with about 8K. So you could play Tyreek and Chubb, like a little mini stack here, and hope that you hit right with that. And then you have your Breeze Cook coming. Something like that could work out. You could do that. I think that would probably be where I would kind of lean on this one. Let's see what happens if we turn this into like a Brady team. Like a Brady onslaught team. So like a Brady. Let's just go to these. Brady. Maybe you go Brady, Evans, Brown. Something like that. Then you got 6,800 left. Let's get us Chubb. It does. So that's reasonable. So like a team like this that's very in between, you probably don't want to find yourself on too much of the Kansas City plays. But Brady, Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, and then we got Chubb as like one of the top leverage plays at running back. That's kind of how I think through those type of teams. So something like, let's look at a Bills defense team. A team like this. So this team, Cam Akers, Devontae Adams, mini stack. John Brown, Mark Andrews, mini stack. Bills defense. So this one's a little bit different because it has Bills defense on it and it doesn't have one of the other wide receiver slots on it. Obviously, it swaps Adams and it does have Akers. So this team's actually in reasonable shape. Maybe not a threat to completely win, but I think it's at least interesting to maybe, I don't know if this, there's a lot of salary gone here, so I don't know if we can make a true Mahomes team work on this one. But like I said, I'm intrigued by these Breeze teams. So if we went Breeze Thomas on this one, Daryl still leaves us with 6,900 left in the flex. If we wanted to bring something on this other side, we could go Chubb. But I like the idea of if it's going to be Breeze and Thomas, we pick one of these. What's nice about this is we can see how this Daryl Williams play goes. We can see if so I guess one of the things that I want to nail home here, guys, is that if you end up with a heavier stack in game number 4, it gives you more information. It's not just like the Daryl Williams and Le'Veon Bell plays. It's if we get to the point where Tyreek goes absolutely crazy or Kelsey goes absolutely crazy and you're sitting here with your Breeze stack, you can make that one even more unique, right? So at that point, maybe you don't stay on Michael Thomas. Maybe at that point, you switch him to Sanders. You guys see what I mean by flexibility on something like this? So if you're not going to be on Mahomes, you're still getting more information for things you can, like, don't just leave your Breeze, Thomas, chalk in there and hope that it's going to be good enough. You know what I mean? You can kind of change your stack from there also. Someone's talking about Baker. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with Baker teams, especially ones that are like somewhat wide open. So like, let's talk about this team for a second. So this one just has Aaron Jones, Packers defense, and Diggs. Originally in here right now is a Mahomes team. But let's see what happens. Like, what's nice about the Baker teams is you can build some really nice Baker teams still with some of the weapons on KC. So if you want Baker, Landry, Hooper maybe, you can bring this back pretty easily with Tyreek. You can probably still play. Let's put Bell in this one. We haven't done that yet. And you got 4,200 left in the flex. That gets you another weapon. You can just fully onslaught Baker with Hooper, Higgins, and Landry, and Tyreek coming back, still having some sort of running back play on the other side with Tyreek. So you can onslaught. So like these teams that are wide open that have at least some sort of failure in there, or maybe you missed out on some of the nice value that happened, right? Sometimes just pivoting it to the Baker side might be much more unique than just the Mahomes side. You can still get a lot of plays you like. Obviously, this team doesn't have Kelsey anymore, but still a lot of upside if this game ends up going nuts. So I hope that's helpful. Dowens with the 199 super chat. Thank you, my man. Who do you like better, Kelsey or Hill? Like in a vacuum? Like most points? I mean, it's so close, guys. Like that's not really how you. I want to get people away from thinking about DFS that way, because that's not really what matters. Like it's you can say the same thing about Kamara versus Kelsey. Like their median projection is 1 point away. Kelsey is like their median projection is essentially the same with Tyreek Hill. So to me, like one way that I would kind of break that tie is someone that's going to be probably a little bit more touchdown driven, like Travis Kelsey. Maybe he wouldn't be on a Le'Veon Bell team who probably needs a touchdown to really hit his ceiling, right? So I think that might be a tiebreaker, like Tyreek with the running backs, because Tyreek can break a big play. Or maybe it's Kelsey without one of these running backs. Maybe it's a Kelsey team with like Chubb on the other side, something like that. I hope that's helpful. There's no correct answer. You know what I mean? Someone said double tight end Kelsey Hooper. Yeah, so like let's see what this team in particular looks like with Baker, and maybe this team doesn't have Tyreek on it. Maybe this one has Kelsey. So you can go like a Baker. Let's change this one to Daryl, because I do think that that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing a lot of today, is just intertwining those type of plays. So Baker, Daryl, Kelsey, does have Hooper, does have Landry, 5,500 left. You could leave that open for like an Antonio Brown. You guys get what I mean here? Like leaving one slot open. I think that it's going to be tempting right now to completely onslaught this next game, which can completely happen. Then you have no flexibility. My argument would be is yes, but I almost would rather have one slot open here. So maybe this one isn't Landry. Maybe this one's Higgins. And then you're sitting here with 7K left over for this game right here, and you can do a lot with 7K. If things are going really well, maybe you play Michael Thomas. If things are not going really well, you can play Evans in this spot. You can play Antonio Brown in this spot still. You guys get what I mean? It's like having more information for that last slot is much more valuable than you guys realize. So that's something that I'm really thinking about as I'm like piecing my way through these teams. I don't have a ton of like complete failures, and that's not a flex. I just have a lot of slots open right now. Okay, so this is a team that we built on stream with Hodge. So this team does have Singletary. This is my only Singletary share. So let's go through a team that has Singletary. So you got Cam Akers, you got Marquise Brown, you got Singletary, you got Ramsey. This team is completely dead. Completely dead. So to me, this is a Breeze team. And to me, where else is leverage, right? We talked about some of the top leverage guys on the entire slate. So to me, this one is probably either a Sanders or Cook type of team with Breeze. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's say this one is Sanders. If we have Singletary here, we're going to make up some ground here at running back. So who's one of the guys that can provide us with a decent ceiling that's going to be relatively low owned? It's probably Nick Chubb. At tight end, we could so one way that this could work with Travis Kelsey in this game is if it ends up being, and Peter talks about this a lot, if it ends up being like a death by 1,000 cuts, where basically Tyreek is just stretching the field, they don't completely hook up with him, and then Mahomes kind of dinks his way up the field with Kelsey. Kelsey gets in the end zone, but he has one of those like 10 or 12 catch games. So I think there's still a chance that Kelsey can get there on his own, and a lot of these other guys don't hit their price value. So if you want like Kelsey Chubb as a mini, and then you're sitting there and you have Sanders and Breeze in game number 4, at that point, you can kind of pick your poison on what you want on the other side with Tampa Bay. Maybe it's Mike Evans. Maybe you're in a pretty good spot and it can be Chris Godwin. Leaving yourself that flexibility, because you know this team's probably going to be a Breeze team. Depending on how this Kelsey and Chubb thing goes in the next game, that kind of is how you frame these last couple plays. Like keeping in mind, this team is epically dead right now, you know? So we'll see like what kind of steam they get with these cheap Kansas City running backs. But I mean, that's going to be something people are talking about all morning, right? So you're trying to figure out where the best leverage is. I still think that it's probably going to be like Antonio Brown or Evans on the Tampa Bay side versus Godwin, especially if you're playing some higher stakes stuff or some like kind of smaller field stuff. I think that Sanders or Cook, if you're playing like a Breeze, Kamara, Thomas team, maybe you take one of those guys out and you replace him with Cook or Sanders. I think that makes some sense. So Someone that we haven't talked about a ton yet is Cameron Breit. So I think one of the ways that you could kind of flip this team on its head and make it be like a Brady team, but a very unique Brady team, is to go with someone like Breit. Maybe you leave Tyreek on this one. Maybe you still leave Chubb on this one. But it's a Breit at tight end team, and then at wide receiver, maybe you can still play like a Michael Thomas on this team, something like that. Again, guys, this 1,500 remaining is not relevant. It's like, how do I make this team unique? How do I give myself an out after this next game? If Tyreek fails, okay, no problem. This team's Sanders now. You guys get what I mean here? Hopefully that was kind of helpful to go through some rosters and stuff like that. I want to make sure I want to catch up on the chat a little bit here. But I think that going through it like in that way will be really valuable for people as kind of the morning progresses. Obviously, things are going to continue to happen. We have the line movement show directly after this or shortly after this. So make sure you guys join us for that one as well. Just want to double check the time. I believe it's 1 p.m. Eastern time. It's been such a weird week for schedule. I did have this pinned and I missed it. There you go. Yeah, so 1 p.m. Eastern time, the Line Movement NFL show. Myself, Peter, and Dieter. Peter will have all the latest news for us there, so we still have a little bit of time before that show for you guys to start tinkering with your teams a little bit. Tilt Space will be tonight, of course. We'll go through that, I believe, like probably at the start of game number 4 after late swaps. What did I miss here? I'm going to scroll up a little bit. I'm sorry if I was not looking at the chat as much, but I wanted to make sure we got through at least some hard examples of ways that I'd be blowing up different types of teams. Feel like Hill is going over 200 yards today. Could happen, man. He's a great play. 35th in the red zone with Kamara left. Should you pivot to Chubb? I would say that you're a little bit further behind Chris than you realize if you only have one spot left. 35th in the red zone with one player left. Kamara's not going to help you get there. So I would say Chubb in that point. People love their Hardman. My concern with Hardman is that he's not that different of a play than Robinson, and Robinson is half the ownership. PDX, amazing content, Joe, learning a lot. Awesome, man. I just hope it's like this is I guess thought process on doing this stream today was not to just like talk about the plays. It's talk about like different ways that you can kind of catch up if you're doing poorly, kind of stick where you're at if you're doing well. I have Akers, Jones, Diggs, Lazard. Would you take Mahomes and Hardman with Kelsey or Baker with Michael Thomas, or Baker and Michael Thomas and Kelsey? It depends on your field size and your contest, my man. I think that's like it's not like just a cop-out answer. I'd say if you have Akers, Jones, Diggs, and Lazard, you're in a pretty good spot, man. So I would play what you think is a little bit closer to optimal. I think staying with Mahomes and Kelsey in that build's probably fine. Kelsey in the flex, Hooper at tight end. Yeah, I think the double tight end thing is going to be pretty popular. Fading Kansas City altogether is definitely in play. Yep. Daryl Williams is going to be over-owned and Bell will be under-owned. That could be. Easier to get Daryl in for sure. I also think that both of those guys are going to be lower than you guys realize. What, 35, like depending on your contest, 40% of the field in some contests have already played Singletary. So they might be out of slots. So they might be lower than you think. Okay, on FanDuel, should you play Kelsey or Tyreek? Man, those are the type of questions that like it's impossible to know, man. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that anyone that sits here and tells you that they have like the answer for something that's that close is probably lying to you. It depends on the rest of your construction. Like I said, I think Kelsey like is a little bit more touchdown driven probably. So if you're playing one of those running backs, I would probably skew towards Tyreek. It's about your roster, not necessarily the play that's 0.04 different in projection. You know what I mean? Let's see. Ton of good receivers today. Agreed, man. There's a lot of different ways you can build your team and still build in upside and get unique. That's why I like game number 4 is so interesting, because there's so many different ways you can build it based on what happens in game number 3. Robinson does well with Watkins out. Yeah, I mean, anytime the target share is going to be condensed. Like, we know it's going to be the Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce show. You know what I mean? The guys outside of that, it's just we've seen that this year time and time again, that it is so condensed there. Does Brees, Thomas, Sanders make any sense? That's a good question, John. So like obviously if we're looking at things like correlation on a 4-game slate, it can be a little bit thin at times. But like guys you shouldn't play together, I think is a reasonable conversation to have. So Emmanuel Sanders in 8 games with Michael Thomas this year, 0.24 correlation. So it hasn't been as negative as I expected. What's interesting, and you guys can tell me your take on this as well, like one of the largest negative correlations with Michael Thomas has been Alvin Kamara this year. But if we look at last year, there was times where both of those guys were getting there consistently. And that could be because Michael Thomas hasn't been just like this alpha target share guy that we've seen over the years, like this year, and I guess a smaller sample. So that's the tough thing about these correlations, guys, is that like it's a very small sample. There were times last year where Tyreek Hill and Kelsey together was something that you'd almost never do. This year, it's mostly neutral. Like just the idea of playing Baker Mayfield with someone like Nick Chubb, is that something you should ever do? And the correlation isn't even that bad. Should you ever play Nick Chubb with Kareem Hunt just to have a different type of roster construction? I think that those kind of things are super interesting as well. You want to try and figure out ways that you can pass people today. That's a really good question, though. Can you guess onslaught Tampa Bay like Pitts last week to get different? You could. You could. I'm a big fan of the onslaughts. I think by default, you're taking away decisions that you're making and you're being a little bit more unique. So yeah, I got no issues with that. Played Lazard, but had Ravens and Singletary, confused on how much to blow up. A lot. Yeah. Ravens and Singletary, you're blowing up a good chunk there, man. But if you have a lot of PMR, man, there's ways that you can still build in a ton of ceiling today. Is Brees, Kamara, Thomas a chalky stack? I don't think it'll be as chalky just after all the Kansas City ownership comes through. Built some naked Lamar. Are those busted? Yes. Akers Ravens start. Where are you at? Is that all you have, James? So if that's all, that's all you have so far, and you can still build like a nice Mahomes team. The fact that you have a Ravens defense, like not many people had Bills defense, right? So if you have something like the Ravens, that it doesn't necessarily like by default mean that your team is dead. It depends on how many slots you have available and what type of contest you're in. Change my Mahomes to Baker, 700 left, flex Chubbs, Evan, Godwin, or Landry. Craig, I have no idea what your roster is like outside of that or what contest you're in. Double tight end has been very popular when everyone saw it win that contest. Yeah, so the double tight end thing is easy to do on this slate, right? When you're looking at the options at that range of us and Hooper, it's easy to just jam him in with Kelsey. I think it'll be relatively popular. Yeah, doesn't mean it's wrong. What's up, Margie? He goes, what up, Joe? What's up, man? I'm not trying to be a downer, guys. Just trying to help you. We got almost 1,000 people in the chat. That's pretty awesome. So no one's, I guess, too upset with me being mean today. Played Diggs with Bills defense completely open. Wow. I think that's a pretty solid open, man. Because there's enough plays the rest of the way to get you there. I think you can play Mahomes on a team like that for sure. Yeah. With where the chalk is at, what kind of PMR is okay? 420? It depends, man. Akers, Diggs, and Bills D. That's a great start. Because by default, Diggs is like cheap enough to where, I mean, he's not epically cheap, but you know what I'm saying. Like, if you didn't have a Singletary team, you're in good shape. Higgins, Sanders, or Harris need to make up some ground. I think Sanders offers the most leverage in that group, J. Tommy. That's a good example of a question, guys. So need to make up some ground. Tell me how much trouble you're in. You know what I mean? That's more or less how you can frame your answer to where you should go. Diggs, Bills, Akers, play safe. Yeah, that's a great start, man. Akers is the cheaper running back that you need so far. You know what I mean? Use the highest owned guy, fine. But there's still going to be some teams out there that have Akers and Singletary that are in some trouble. Akers was the 6th highest scorer yesterday. What's up, Richard Super? How's it going, my man? Favorite Bucks wide receiver, Godwin. But it depends on your team. Play Diggs, Jones, Akers, and Bills D in 3 teams. Nice, man. That's going to be brutal, that Jones thing, where he's a yard short of the bonus. I feel like that's going to suck because I have I have 3 main teams. 2 of them have Aaron Jones. So that's not great. Love the fact that you teach us to fish. It's impossible to give all the answers. It's just not valuable to give all the answers, Jay Gardner, but I appreciate you saying that, man. Hopefully this has been helpful. Make the uncomfortable play today, guys. Try and understand when to late swap. If I only played Smokey in Hollywood, am I behind? That's an interesting one because what's opening up with these Kansas City running backs, with having Smokey in Hollywood, they weren't like complete busts. Like both of them were in the top 12 of scorers yesterday. But you've missed out on Akers. You've missed out on potentially the Buffalo defense being the top defense on the slate, the one that you need to win a tournament. That's one where I would probably still feel comfortable playing Mahomes with. Best video I've watched in a long time. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it, man. No problem, Kay. Hope it works out for you. 7 teams left. Diggs, Lazard, Bills, D. Ready for the slate. Awesome, man. So you're wide open, Jeremy. Cool. That's some nice stands that you took yesterday, my man. Diggs, Lazard, Bills, D. Let's go, man. I would imagine you're going to end up with a decent amount of Mahomes. Hope it works out for you. Higher upside, Landry or Antonio Brown? That's a good question. I like Landry a lot in a vacuum. He's like these Browns guys are ones that I feel like have just been finding their way into my lineups most of the week. Definitely think if your team is struggling, then Antonio Brown provides a little bit more leverage. Yeah. Let's talk about Dredger. What's up, Big Show? BSB in the chat. How's it going, my man? He's not on my radar, but I'm willing to take a look. I don't even know how to spell this guy's name. Oh, BSB wants to talk hockey. I thought this was like some random, like, super thin tight end or, I don't know, something. BSB's in here trolling. What's up, BSB? Am I excited NHL is back? I am, man. I'm really focused on NFL right now, but I'm excited to get back into the NHL weeds very soon. Nick in the chat, do you ever consider that half of the ownership on some chalk is on teams that are already dead? That's a good point, Nick. So yeah, there's going to be some times where if you have, that's a good argument in favor if you have like a relatively clean team. Like some people are mentioning in the chat that they had like some Diggs, Lazard, Bills defense and nothing else. That's almost better that there's going to be some teams out there that have some of the good chalk, that have Akers, that have some Stephon Diggs, but they also have some failures in there. One of the big things is if you have a relatively clean team going into some of the best games on the slate, yeah, you're probably in a better spot than you realize. So that's a good point. That's something that we probably should have touched on before, that a lot of some of the best plays that have already happened, some of those lineups are a little bit behind anyway because they haven't left enough PMR for today. Kevin Woodward, preferred way to support your work. Just come to the streams, man. Like the videos, comment on the videos, tell your friends. Rating and review on Apple Podcasts is something that definitely helps out. The Patreon is $1 per month. We're going to keep that thing going throughout the off season. So that's where we kind of get into kind of these kind of conversations, right? So yeah, there's a lot of different ways, man. I would say 99.9 of the percent of the ways to support what I'm doing, it's completely free, my man. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it. This is a video that every DFS player should watch. I think so. This isn't a Ramos and Sunshine stream. This is hey guys, you need to be slapped in the face because that DraftKings thing on your phone right now that says you're winning money, that could easily not look like that very shortly. AB and Godwin or Kamara and Hardman? Depends on where you're at. I'm trying not to get away from Kamara, obviously. I think Kamara is an awesome play. Revenge Street at running back. There's a lot of narrative street and Revenge Street at running back. We got Hunt. We got, yeah, I'm with you, man. Is this the day that Gronk saves your Beasley lineups? Maybe. Gronk is like one of those guys that is the ceiling sky high? Maybe not, but like it's a gross position. Like if Gronk beats Hooper, you're probably in a pretty good spot, right? You just need some failures to happen. I think one of the things that like people need to realize is we don't have all the answers on these slates. You can look at projections, all that stuff. It's still football when it comes down to it. Anything can happen. Mahomes stacks to Breit stacks, best leverage if you're a little behind. I like that, Kay. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Play Fournette over Kamara with Breeze, Michael Thomas, Hill, Kelsey. I'm less interested in the Tampa Bay running backs currently because I like the Kansas City, like taking a shot on to see what happens with the Kansas City running backs in the next game. But yeah, at that point, you're going to have to see where your salary's at, man. Line up with only Akers locked. Do I full on slot game 3 or open slots for game 4? So let's go back and do one more example here before we wrap up because I have a team that's just like that actually. So let's do that. Swaps. Wide open Akers team. This is one that we built with Hodge. That was just a Tampa Bay stack, but we can use it as an example. A wide open Akers team, to me, it's probably a Mahomes team. So let's see what happens when we make a Mahomes team here. Again, the leverage probably is Saints. We're not playing Browns D against Mahomes. So let's say Higgins to give us some flexibility here. Could probably get in Kamara on this team. So we're still like, we might not be able to get Kamara on this team actually. Can we get in Michael Thomas with this team? Nope. We cannot. These guys are expensive. It's like so difficult to build these type of teams. Should we build the double tight end team that you guys were talking about? 4,700 left at these wide receiver slots. So in this situation, you probably... I would love to have at least one, like to answer your question, I would love to have at least one slot available in this Saints Tampa Bay game outside of just the defense. So like if you got to a spot where maybe instead of Hooper, maybe you like play like I don't want to say like who's more expensive between Breit and Gronk? Probably Gronk, right? Yeah. So maybe Gronk is here and you have the ability to swap Gronk to Breit if it doesn't go well in this game, something like that. 5,500 doesn't quite get you. It does. Antonio Brown, if you wanted to go that route, something like that. Yeah, it's an interesting situation when you have this much available. So yeah, if you have this amount available, you could go Antonio Brown, you could go Sanders. You know what I mean? Like even if this isn't Gronk, if this is Hooper, having this spot available to tweak around to like different types of things. Obviously, this one just misses Antonio Brown, but you can still get in Manuel Sanders on this team, that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's a good question. Is Baker going to get popular from late swap? I think Baker, Breeze, and Brady will all be pretty similar. I actually think that Breeze will probably be the lowest, but at that point, it's all very close. So I think Mahomes is going to come in, depending on your contest, probably around 30 to 35%. CEH out. Nice. It's kind of what we expected, right? Daryl Williams. Le'Veon Bell season. I love that this happened in the middle of the slate, guys. Couple more questions, guys. I'm going to go do some swaps myself before the Line Movement Show. The Line Movement Show is at 1 p.m. Eastern time over on the Line Movement channel. The Tilt Space will be on that later on tonight with myself, Peter, and Leone, talking through some of our higher stake teams. If you've gotten at least a decent amount of value, do me a solid. Toss a like on this video here shortly if you haven't already. Let's help some more people find this video before lock. Hopefully help some people late swap into all the glory. I'd appreciate it. This late swap seems to be more about dealing with who you played rather than chasing who you didn't play. Is that correct? I think so. Yeah, it's like, where's your team at? And we'll figure it out from there, right? I mean, it's still about what you missed out on. But what you missed out on matters on like the ownership, right? If you missed out on Adam Lazard at 8%, that's not really something you're blowing up your team for because only 8% people have him. Which KC running back gets a TD? Probably Bell. What time is the Tilt Space? The Tilt Space is going to be, I believe, the start of game number 4, roughly. We're still trying to figure it out. Like, basically, if we're completely dead, maybe it'll be halftime of game number 4. If we have some sweats, maybe it'll be right after we finish our final late swaps. Joe's the best camera in the business. It's a curse in some ways. I'll say that. I get a zit on my cheek. You guys see it right away. Great strategy show. Learned a lot. Good, man. I'm glad. Appreciate it, guys. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Going to wrap this up. Don't want this longer video to scare some people off of watching it, so we're right at an hour. I'll see you guys on the Line Movement Show very shortly. If you get over there with us in about 45 minutes, let us know in the chat where you came from, and you can do that by saying "we are back" in the chat. Good stuff, guys. Wasn't trying to be a downer, just trying to be helpful. All right, we'll talk soon.